if you're thinking about where to focus as an independent artist, I wouldn't be trying to go be put in the biggest, action movie. Plus, there's only so many songs. I always tell artists to focus on TV because there's so much more opportunity.
Trigger Toven,
music supervisor and producer.
I think that's where a lot of artists and labels and everybody has a problem because like the label will get told by their bosses, get this song in a movie. Just because it's a song that happens to be out right now and it's like a hot artist doesn't mean that it's going to match the story or the emotion that you're trying to portray on screen.
One of the coolest jobs I've ever heard about is a music supervisor who picks the music that goes in movies, TV shows, adverts, video games, and more. And today I'm speaking to Trigger Toven, who's had a career working on projects like Fallout, Westworld, Amsterdam, and so many of the Marvel projects, John Wick, and even more. And in this insightful conversation, I wanted to know, how do they pick which song works with the footage that you see on screen? How do they choose from hundreds of submissions to go for the right song that fits the right mood? And this conversation was a lot deeper than I expected. It wasn't about BPMs, it wasn't about tempo, it wasn't about, pitch and sound design. It was about the energy. And it's such an important conversation so you know what to include in your music when you submit it for sync. And the value Trigger is sharing on Twitter, in his newsletter, and in his course is something that I didn't want you to miss. And so here are the secrets behind music supervision. I have so many questions about the world of music supervisors, how artists get their songs into TV and film. And I wanted to just pick your brains, I guess, from the very, very beginning and understand what are some of those steps for musicians who are thinking of getting into that world. What do they have to know about music supervision to even understand the landscape first?
Thanks for having me, by the way. This is awesome. But I think the one thought I always like to talk about first is just that supervisors are fans, just like all of us. Like they, we just love music. So that's why we get into the job, because we like all different kinds of music. And it's like one of the jobs where you can kind of listen to all the music. And if you're building your fan base, then you're more likely to find supervisors as well, because they're out there looking for music the same as your fan base would be. So I just always think that like when you're reaching out to supervisors directly, it's a lot harder. So I always suggest working with like a sync agent, which sounds crazy, but it's basically like a company that reps music just for sync. So you could have a record label because they have a sync team. Your publisher could have a sync team. And then there's these sync agents that basically only rep the music for sync. So they don't take the money from like your, regular royalties or your Spotify check or anything. They just focus on getting to people like me. So I think that's, and I don't think people even know those companies exist. So that's usually where I like to, jump off and say that's a really good place to try to focus your efforts versus like one-to-one relationships with supervisors, just because like when I go out for something, I'll go to like 50 to 100 companies and ask them for something specific. And they have, then I'm accessing thousands of artists and ideas and songs versus like me hitting you up and be like, yo, do you have this? And you're like, no, that's not what I do. And then I'm not going to email 1,000 people. But if I hit up like 100 companies or even like 30 companies, I'm getting thousands of artists and songs ready. So I know a lot of people want to do things on their own, which is totally, I'm not going to knock the hustle if you go direct, but I think that it's a good use of your time, to try to find somebody to work with on that level.
Thank you for making that really clear. I think definitely want to pick your brains about what the sync agent's looking for, what the brief says, and how you kind of pick what vibe you're going for in a song. But in terms of your job itself, how much of it is watching the footage of a particular scene or a particular TV series or a particular movie, and then thinking, what emotion do I want to transfer through this scene? And how much of it comes down to like really understanding the plot of the visual and then finding the appropriate music to go with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you nailed it. That's the job, right? So obviously we're getting direction from a director or a showrunner, depending on the project. And kind of getting their vision of what, because the script can mean so many different things. You can read it that it's going to go this direction, and the director's thinking the character is coming from this angle. So it's really good to start with that direction. But yeah, it's exactly right. You're trying to portray the emotion that's happening on screen, and depending on the director, he or she may think that the audience, needs to have this emotion going. The audience may need to have a certain emotion being portrayed versus that coming from the character. So there's all different ways to think about it. So that's usually good. That's why we get it directly from the director, because they are encompassing the entire idea of the plot and the story and what needs to be portrayed. But that's what I like to focus on, is what emotions on screen and how am I going to elevate that, just elevate that emotion on screen.
When is like the moment then that you need something more cinematic, ambient, and abstract? And when is the moment when you need something more lyrical from a big name so that their voice carries through and there's a different emotion on screen from hearing a Kendrick or a Burna Boy or a whoever? When is that right time for the big name, and when is the right time for the just that sounds, that landscape, that moment?
Yeah, I think the overall project has a big part to do with that. So if I'm working on like a big budget movie, and you're trying to, a lot of times we used to call it like paying for the joke. So if you're in like a big comedy and there's like some big epic moment happening, and you cut to a song that everybody knows, that like it's just going to elevate it automatically, because you now you have that connection to that song, so that it's gonna make the moment that much better, that much funnier. And so that's where you use those like known songs and that like connection to the audience, because that way they're just pulled into the story that much better. um a lot of times, if you think of it like a movie like Drive, do you remember that movie where the whole soundtrack was stuff that people didn't know unless you were kind of
Okay.
into the underground kind of synthwave vibes? But it was an overarching feel for the whole show that was matching these kind of 80s visuals and kind of neon vibes with the driving. So I think that's when it's an overarching thing. Even though it's a big movie, there's still it's all about kind of supporting the story, and it's always about supporting the story. But I think sometimes when you have a big budget and like big people on screen, well-known A-list actors, and then you cut to a song that's like a pop song, but it's like a totally unknown artist, you'll feel it as an audience. Then you're like, so why did they go that? Like it's almost like you need to match the level of what you're watching. Not saying that it does, that's not always true. It's just sometimes it happens that way. So I think that's usually what I'm thinking about when people are like, why can't you just put a brand new artist in this spot? Is because a lot of times you'll feel it as an audience and it'll pull you out, because you'll be like, what's that random song going in that big moment? But if it's like a big emotional thing and the song's just perfect and it just works, sometimes that happens as well. So I think that's usually, and then I also like to split it up, because if you're thinking about where to focus as an independent artist, I wouldn't be trying to be put in the biggest, action movie, or
Yeah.
or just the, like the biggest A-list movie. Because of that reason, there's less opportunities, and plus there's only so many songs in these movies, and the process is a lot longer, and they have the budget to kind of pay for whatever makes the most sense for the story. um so I think a lot of times I always tell artists to focus on TV, because there's so much more opportunity for it. Doesn't feel, there's some a ballad over like an emotional montage at the end of the episode. That doesn't feel weird if it's not somebody you've heard of. In fact, it's more fun if it's somebody that's you're discovering it with the characters. And also, TV marketing, they're usually just looking for like a certain energy, and they don't necessarily care about paying for the name. um Commercials sometimes as well, but obviously, we've all seen commercials with a big huge song on it. But I think those are the opportunities to focus on versus like big films.
Artists who only upload their music videos onto YouTube are missing out. But thanks to DistroVid by DistroKid, you can now distribute your official music video onto Vivo, Apple Music, TikTok Music, and Tidal. To upload an unlimited number of music videos onto those stores, you can get started for just $99 a year. The benefit of using DistroVid is that you keep 100% of the earnings you make on any of those platforms, but it massively increases your distribution and your network of that video. If you're part of the DistroKid family, you can upgrade your membership to include DistroVid, but if you're not, I'll give you a 7% discount using my link, and that is distrokid.com/VIP/all about helping. Huge love as always to the DistroKid family for sponsoring the entire season 2 of this pod and empowering smart artists with digital tools.
You know what? Thank you for that. That's a really clear distinction of like when big name is right and when the small name is right. And then does it get into murky waters when it almost crosses into the territory of scoring a film, when you're getting custom sounds made, like Star Wars had John Williams, of course, and other, you know, like the Black Panther movie, they went to Top Dog Entertainment, to my understanding, and they said, curate this lineup. Like, is there a line you can cross into when you, yeah, of course, I know. There's a line you cross over when you get into custom picking, you need to create new music for this song versus what you've already got. Where's that boundary?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really cross over to scoring, because if it's a song moment, then it's, you know, you're connecting back to that song versus the fully instrumental, like just kind of like pulling on the heartstrings. But I think, I mean, custom really, I don't know, it all depends, because there's certain times when you're just wanting to get a big marketing help or push, because you want to connect the audience that's going to love this movie to the audience that already loves a big artist. So there's that time to do something big and custom. But then if you think about somebody like Black Panther, you're going into a world that nobody knows about and doesn't exist yet, and you've never seen on screen before. So there's certain baggage that comes with known songs. So, you know, like if you go into this 90s hip hop in New York era, you're going to feel, you know, that's connected to a memory in your brain of what that sounds like and what it feels like. So how do you, you know, you put a 90s Jay-Z song on a Wakanda scene, and, you know, I mean, if it's connecting back to the real world, it's all good, but, you know, you're kind of like making this new world. So why not make something original and new? So I think that's a lot of times why you're going custom, just because you can, and you know, you have that, you're kind of painting a new canvas that doesn't exist before. So I'm trying to think of other examples.
I love this so much, that the levels and the nuances of which you're interpreting the visuals, and how music soundtracking can completely transform the way you perceive and have the energy felt about visuals. I think it's fascinating, honestly, the way that you've done so many different projects when you've done music from so many different genres. Like, is there ever like is there a go-to for you that, you know, you prefer to put neo soul, you prefer to put hip hop, you prefer to put something cinematic, or does it always come down to like understanding what the audience wants and what the director wants and finding that sweet spot?
I mean, of course, I have favorites of music of my own, but rarely do you get to kind of like do your thing, and then so you kind of get typecast and like that he does hip hop movies or whatever.
Okay.
I think I mean, I'm gonna find stuff that I love, so, you know, there's maybe that colors it a little bit, but no, it's all about the story. Like, it has to be driven by the story, and I think that's where a lot of artists and labels and everybody has a problem, because like the label will get told by their bosses, like, get this song in a movie, and then we're like, just because it's a song that happens to be out right now and is like a hot artist, doesn't mean that it's going to match the story or the emotion that you're trying to portray on screen. So it's a kind of a hard, you know, struggle sometimes. It's got to be for the people that have that job, because you know, like, we can't force it in. It's got to just make sense, you know. The difference would be if you're making something, you know, like you get a big artist to make a song for the movie, then everything works, you know. But that process is tough too, you know, because then there's just a lot of politics involved in getting that done. So
what's the approval chain like? I don't want you to name names or be uncomfortable, but what's it like if you believe a song fits a project, a movie, TV series? Do the higher ups have any say? Can they veto it? Like, how does that process going about? I'm backing these artists. but the higher ups think differently. Is there a struggle sometimes?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've got so many different people that are have their hands on it. So we obviously don't have the final say as a supervisor. So you're kind of providing the options, working directly with the director or the showrunner or the editor or whoever's involved in that particular part of the process. But yeah, it's got to get through. Basically, I'll send it. Um, Either I'm sending it directly. If I'm talking about film, we'll talk about film specifically. Either I'm sending it directly to the director,
Okay.
and then they're listening to it, and then kind of choosing and going back and forth and feedback and vibes of what they want. Or, but usually, I mean, I'll say, or I'm just sending it to the editor. But a lot of times, I'm sending it to the director and the editor and the producer, and if
Gotcha.
there's a creative producer involved. Um, so then the editor's got to cut it in. And I'm not saying that anytime I see a song and think about it in my head, the way it's going to work, it's going to be perfect and actually cut in right. So the editor has to agree and it has to actually work once they cut it into picture. So you're kind of getting through the editor as well, as far as like tastes and what they think the creative direction is. Um, I mean, obviously you want to streamline to like the one overall creative, but everybody's got their kind of idea of what that direction looks like. So, and there's so many people involved. It's not like the director can be completely nitty gritty on every little thing that's happening. But yeah, it's you've got that's just within the filmmaking. So then the producer also can weigh in and be like, the producer's thinking more of a selling the movie vibe than just getting the story across. Obviously, that's the director's job. So then the producer might be like, I don't like that song. Why don't we try something bigger there? So, you never know. I'm not saying producers are all driven by that, but obviously it's a slightly different way to look at what they need, what the film needs. And then you've got the studio that also comes in and weighs in and they have to like the song. So, there's all these different levels and you're kind of trying to make everybody happy as a supervisor. Obviously the most important is what the director wants and what the story feels like it needs. But then you also kind of have to make sure that the producer and their needs are met, and then the studio at the same time has slightly different ideas of what needs to be done because that's all this battle between the director and the studio sometimes. So it's and it music it's just so subjective. So
True.
it's just what I mean, like it doesn't, even if it's perfect, quote unquote, it's just that everybody has their own opinion on it. So it can get messy sometimes that way.
I really rate that. That's such a nice segue into talking about the brief. And so, can we kind of, without going into too many specifics, what kind of things go into a brief to the sync agent? We're looking for X, and we want you to pitch us songs that fit this quantifiable container of music. What kind of things go in there? Genre, energy, mood, BPM, key. What kind of things go into a brief?
Yeah, I think every supervisor probably is a little different, and the projects are different as well. Like I've seen other people's briefs, and I'm like, whoa, that's totally different. People that write like 3 pages of details, and then I personally am a little bit more vague because I like to leave the creativity a little bit more open because I'm reaching out to people that are also creative and love what they're doing. So not to the point of where they don't know what the heck I want, but hopefully, but it's like I would all depends. Like sometimes I'm in, New York in 1976 and I need something directly from that era, because that's just what the story needs. But so then in that case, I would have maybe it's a specific tempo. They shot to something, we have to replace it, and now they're dancing, and it's like it has to be exact for a certain thing.
Gotcha.
So in that case, I mean, in general, we're saying, an idea of tempo, like mid to up tempo, uh, certain era, a certain genre, a general description of what the scene is, so that they
Okay.
can also kind of have an idea of what you're going after. If you can share that information, a lot of times,
Yes.
like I've done a lot of Marvel projects, we had to be very vague because you can't really give away anything. It's so secretive.
Yep.
Or even like with my Westworld team, that was the same sort of like high security. So it all depends, which makes everyone's job a little bit harder when you have to hide the information. So I have to try to, so in that case, I basically focus on the emotion because that's what you're going after, right? Some people really want specific lyrics. I just want the lyrics to support it. I don't want it to necessarily be like on the nose. And like we used to call it see and say when I did promo marketing, where the guy'd be talking about something in the lyrics, and then you'd see somebody, hammering a nail, and then they're talking, it's like so specific, and I that's too much for me. But some people go after that. So I try to be a little bit more vague and focus on emotion instead of specifics like genres and eras and all those things. If you can be open like that in the project, if it, works for that. And also, I think if I'm focusing on emotion, then you're getting a creative connection to the person that's helping you find the music as well, versus, hey, replace this song. Because if it's this exact song, and then all of a sudden they send you stuff that's exactly in that era, the same genre, the lyric is about the same thing, and then you're limiting it into this box, and it could have been totally outside of that box, maybe about the same subject, but from a totally different era and a totally different genre, and it still could have worked. You never know. So and that's what's cool about the job in general, is because unless this is a period piece and it feels weird, you can kind of go everywhere. So that's why I'm a little bit more vague with my briefs. But yeah, sometimes you get real detailed.
I find this inspiring because not only do I love what you're saying about where we can describe the scene for NDA reasons, we do. I'm guessing you don't always say the title of the movie or the title of the TV series, because then
you can't even say what it is in those. Yeah.
People get too excited about stuff. And then I like, when you watch a film and you expect there to be a rap song, but there's like a metal song with a rap on top. I love when curveballs like that get thrown into the mix, because it gives you something you weren't expecting, and it makes you feel differently. Even if you don't appeal to those personal listening tastes, it fits the vibe. Like in Black Panther, there was a very techno-y song during a car chase, and that threw me for six, because that was one of my favorite bits of the movie eventually. How do you game
then Kendrick comes in and starts rapping over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you game plan for the unexpected in that way?
I mean, I think that's always the goal. If unless you really are trying to make a comforting, you're just there to support it. But I think if you can make the audience think, that's awesome. That's the goal. So I think it's also broadening. It's not, you don't want to do anything obvious anytime. You want to like move the medium forward by making bold choices. So I can't really plan for it, but I guess we're kind of always trying to plan for it. But really, it's like you don't want to just throw something off the wall. It has to be story supported and make sense for the character and whatever you're doing. So I think it's just a matter of thinking more broadly about those options.
So I'm understanding more about these briefs. And then let's say you've gone to these 100 different sync agents and companies, and you've received many, many, many songs. Like I'm going to guess 50 to 300 sort of songs replied to your brief. That's going to be my guess. What's that process like? Sitting down, going through them, not getting distracted, but like carefully considering each one. Is it right for the scene? Do you watch the scene over each time and play the song on the top? Do you just have the feeling while you're listening? How do you interpret the process of reviewing the submissions?
So since I've worked in a lot of different mediums, I can answer the question depending on the type of job as well, because when I did trailers, most of the time you're not seeing anything. But then you're kind of finding a song for the overall show or the overall movie. So it's versus like a specific scene or an emotion. So then you're always going for either a positive or like a dark vibe, depending on how you're selling. Like called a soft sell is a more emotional sell, or like a hard sell is more like energy and aggressive. So it's just another totally different version of the job, is where you're cutting the whole show into a 30-second spot, and then how can you help get the idea across and still make it unique to that show. So we wouldn't have any visuals half the time, because they're cutting they cut it to the music. So then it's like, oh, here's this new movie. They wouldn't even like give us the movie. We would know, okay, Will Smith's in it and it's about robots. Okay, so here's the vibe of what it could be like, and then we start pulling stuff. obviously the editor has an idea in mind of what they're going to be doing and what they give you their own brief on what the movie's like and everything. But yeah, we would have to just pull ideas just out of thin air on what it could be like, like I want to get this certain energy across, get a little electro hip hop going or something cool. And then, so that's one version. So then, uh, in a TV or film version, hopefully you've seen stuff. A lot of times you haven't yet. Well, there's two parts. So one's before they shoot. If it's on camera, a lot of times somebody's singing along to something. You've got to figure all that out before they shoot, obviously, because they're going to sing it on camera. So then you're just basically, you read the script and you know what you think it should be. You talk to the director, figure out kind of what you want to go after, and then you go through options. So then you've sent out the brief, and then you have the specific thing you need. Now you're getting all the submissions back. So you go through. I mean, we kind of get really good at like hopping to the parts of the song because you learn the structure, especially in promo and trailers. Like you need a certain like dynamic movement of the song. It can't just be like, because I remember like Wu-Tang never really worked very well in trailers because they would start a loop beat and it would just be this, and it didn't really have the dynamics of say of like a Just Blaze
Yep.
produced beat or something where it's like huge and like dynamic and goes everywhere. So all those things to consider. So basically you start looking for certain elements in a song, and okay, so now this is dope, but then does it go anywhere? Now does it have a back end that's going to take you through the whole trailer and keep the energy up? So it's all those things you're looking for. In trailers and promo, obviously the lyric can't be too specific either. You don't want to have it can't be just about this town, even though it's the movie's about aliens and he's singing about Seattle. So
Okay.
there's all those little things that you think about, and that's something to think about as an artist when you're making stuff. I don't want to like start the process out that way, but if you're considering, oh, this song feels like it could be good for sync, and then at those sort of the things to think about, like, oh well, the opportunities are going to go way down if you're very specific about something. So there's, those things to think about. That's what I'm looking for. Mainly, it's just the feel. I'm just going for a certain energy that's going to feel what I'm doing. TV and film, then you're, let's say, in post, you've seen the scene, you've watched the episode before. I mean, a lot of times we're sending music before they cut it as well because we want to give the editors options that are either affordable or in the vibe of what we're trying to do. Because if you've already watched it, then you're never going to get a cut without songs to it. The editors already put something in
cut
then,
it,
so then you're kind of like chasing what they're doing. So it's better to be kind of planning ahead based on the script, and like you set up a certain sound for the show, so then you can send buckets of ideas and things of that sort. But if you're specifically replacing a song or something in a scene, then I think you're going through what's already there, looking for a certain emotion. You're trying to, either if they love what's there, then you're matching that emotion. And, it's all the things we talked about in the brief. It's like, does the lyric support the story and move it forward? Is there one thing, like when I was doing Westworld, the song had to work on like 4 levels. So Ramin would be doing a cover of the song, like instrumentally, but then the song had to lyrically work for the scene, even though there's no lyrics in it, because it'd be a song that people recognized. So then you would know the lyrics, but you wouldn't be hearing them.
Wow.
So it's like this crazy, like multiple levels going on in your brain. So, but then also, are you doing a little foreshadowing of something that's going to happen later in the season? Because the show is very mysterious and you don't know what, everyone's trying to guess what's going to happen. And then also, is the song working on a overall level for the show? Like, we wouldn't just pick any random song. It'd be all kind of in a certain style or era, and it all kind of, you became the sound of it, even though it's all covers. But the songs, there's a lot of like Nine Inch Nails and stuff to that realm. So it's like, how do you, I don't know, just all those levels you're thinking about as you're going through ideas to pull. So, but also we do a lot of pulling on our own too, not just from briefs. So you'll just be looking for stuff on Spotify and just dive deep into stuff we like and, see where the rabbit hole takes us.
It's amazing. The word music geek gets thrown around a lot, but I see the width and breadth of your music taste is insane. Like you've gone from boom bap to Nine Inch Nails into electro synthwave, and you're cognizant of all the different artists and the subgenres and the experimentals at the top of the scene and the fast rising artists. I'm blown away, honestly. And so you want to
Yeah, I
work,
mean, it's a lot.
you want to work with everything that's right for the project, and you'll work on so many variants of varying projects that it makes sense that you can lend from something no one else, you said about being expecting the unexpected, you can actually put your stamp on a trigger project by making it so unique in a way. I love that.
Yeah, I think that's what's so cool about like getting a new project that you haven't done before. Like, how can you, let's say it's like I did a movie called Amsterdam. It's like 20s and 30s music. And I didn't really know that much about that, but then you dive really deep in and then you become an expert by the end of the movie because now you're going through all these options and figure it out. So that's definitely fun. It's it's also hard to keep up with all the new music and then also know every song that's ever existed. You can't really know it all, but an understanding of the eras and the styles I think is really important.
For every single one of you watching, I want to give you a free gift, which is a copy of my brand new book, The 6-Week Song Release Strategy. Yes, it's important to get your music into sync, but it's also critical that you drive your own streams. And inside this free book, I'm going to show you a process how I launch a song from scratch. Even if you have no fan base, even if you have no existing monthly listeners, and even if you've never released a song before. This is the 0 to 10,000 streams approach, how you can scale your song using no ads, no playlists, no PR, no radio, just the power of organic social media. You can grab your copy for free and access a free course using the link below, which is allabouthelping.co.uk. I hope you enjoy your copy. It's a quick read of just 20 pages and will be out very, very soon on Amazon and Audible for anyone who wants a physical copy or to listen to the audiobook.
Awesome.
Kind of bringing it to the money aspect for musicians, you kind of mentioned, so budgets for these sync placements. I know it's not your specialty, you pick what matters to you. What's then the process like, if you can explain the process of you've chosen a song, it's approved. Now an offer is made to the sync agent or directly to the artist, what they would be willing to pay out in exchange for putting the song in the movie. How does that process kind of unpack?
So with we kind of already know a general budget range of everything that we're working with. So the briefs will include the budget a lot of times,
Okay.
which I didn't mention before. So
Okay.
this is all we have. Only send options that are going to be okay within that range. So it's like they should know their artists are okay being within this range of money. So, and then with the bigger stuff that just gets thrown in and chosen purely creatively with no thought of budget, then we have to kind of know what the range is going to be for that artist at that level, and like with that kind of how basically their popularity in their market. Once we have a certain range, like we already know those, like you can name anybody and I could tell you a general range of what I think it'll probably cost, because like it's kind of the job. So but a lot of the once we have a specific brief, then and somebody likes it, so like you're saying, it's been chosen and it's all there, so then we have to go back and try to start clearing the song. We tell them the scene it's being used for, how long it's being used, the type of use, which is like, is it a background vocal or is it a background instrumental or is it on camera? And there's all these different versions and the reason they split that up is because on the cue sheet on the back end, when they get paid every time it airs on TV, the type of use depends on, they get paid more depending on how it gets used. So we have to go all those details.
Sorry, can I jump
it's
in?
probably,
Is it less likely to be a flat fee, but it's more so it's fee plus payment per time it's used, accumulated over a quarter, for example?
yeah, it's always both. It's always upfront fee and then back end, which gets paid through like the public, for like the performance royalties companies in each country. So if you're signed up with them, so then every time it airs on TV, you get a quarter or something. I don't know how much, it's probably not much, but but it adds up because that's like, you know,
Yes.
all these people are playing everything. So, and then every country is, you know, also recording those that use and then paying back to your society that's paying you. So that amount is always set, right? Nobody can negotiate on what that is, but the upfront is always negotiated depending on what you're doing. So yeah, so it's always both. Sometimes there's like a buyout scenario, but in general, everyone's, you know, trying to, I think I'm sure a lot of companies would love to just do a buyout, not pay the back end, but I think most uh, you know, everyone's trying to protect the artists and have that kind of like royalty that keeps on going as long as the film or TV project exists.
Out of pure curiosity, paint me the picture of an artist is getting their very first sync placement. Say they're on 100,000 streams on Spotify, but they're not big. They're on 10,000 Instagram followers. Just out of curiosity, is that ballpark around 5 to 8 grand, or more or less? Whereabout am I?
So it all depends on the what it's being used for.
Okay.
But yeah, in a film or TV, probably around there. Yeah, I think that's actually a good amount because I mean a good guess, I would say, because yeah, it really depends. Like a promo trailers, they pay differently. TV pays differently depending on if it's a teensy TV show or like a big one, but there's a general TV range. Film has a general range, but then an indie film will pay, you know, much less, and then a large film will pay more. But even on a large film, a new artist is probably still around that range, maybe a little bit more, but that's probably like a TV range, like a general TV range for a new artist, I would say, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I was just a guess off the top of my head, like having seen a few artists over my years get offered sync, and they sometimes undersell themselves. Sometimes they do it for the exposure that their song will be in a film or in a TV show. And I'm always going to be like, secure the bag, right? Because the producer and the production company, they got money. They're spending hundreds of thousands into the millions on this program. They can afford your little sync fee. I think many
I know.
artists
I mean,
sell themselves.
yeah. No, of course. I mean, that's true. But also like it's all market driven pricing, right? Like basically if, you know, which is weird because a lot of times nobody wants to hear that either, but it's like if you like what you're bringing to your own audience basically changes what you cost
Yeah.
on the, you know, on the for the project, which is interesting. Um but yeah, I mean, it's obviously that's what's hard for us sometimes because we don't set the budgets. Like if you're at the studio level, you're at least like trying to argue, well, this movie needs this much because you know all these music song moments and everything. But in general, we get a budget and then we have to fit in with that. So yeah, that's what's hard because we're actually the go between the artists and those producers. So
Okay.
then even though the producers are setting the range of what it is, and you'll get a movie that has a huge budget, but then they put no money into music because they're planning on just scoring the whole thing. And then all of a sudden the director puts in like 30 songs. So then you're kind of in this hard situation where no one is budgeted for that music. And I'm not saying that situation they should take less than they're owed, but it also it's always, yeah, it's always a give and take of like what is available
Sure.
and what
For sure.
you know what the artists can get kind of as a market price for their music in general. It's a weird thing because it's a constantly there's no set price for anything, you know. It's like what I was talking about earlier is kind of the range that ends up falling in. But really is if it's like this is exactly what we have left over and we're putting in these 3 spots, this is all we have to spend for those spots. And then, you know, you do what you do. But obviously I wouldn't say that you should go. I mean, it's weird because the indie movies doesn't have money for anything and then they music's last, so then they end up uh you basically it's always last because they've already spent the money on shooting it.
Totally.
So and then they're putting the music at the end. So then they're like, it's whatever's left over. And then it's hard because it's like it is an opportunity. It's in the movie. I also would tell artists to think about if you're going to take that risk and give. I mean, I don't consider it a risk because it's an option. Uh, it doesn't really hurt you if you get a free placement in a movie. Um, but I would say that like if you're gonna have that take that choice to maybe think about how featured the spot is.
Yes.
So, if you if you're going to give it to them for $100, is it super background in somebody's bedroom? Okay, but if it's like a big montage spot, then maybe, like you say, try to secure the bag a little bit more because it's more important to the movie. So, you know what I mean? Like that, because that's what we do. Like a lot of times it's like, how featured is the spot? And can we put in less expensive music in the really background stuff because you can't really hear it anyway. It's not doing as much to drive the story. Like the vibe is, but it's not everything about the song is not that important versus like a big, musical moment. So then you try to secure the money for these spots, and that's another part of the job is just, kind of like how do you divvy up the budget to make sense and get the most bang for your buck in the different spots.
Makes total sense.
But I was thinking you should write a song and see where it lands versus
Mm-hmm.
like I'm gonna write a sync song. Now I'm gonna do happy chords and then I'm gonna, like and then it ends up being kind of a cheesy song that, like we don't want to just because it works for sync doesn't mean it's a good song now. So I think
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like focus on your songwriting process and then if you happen to be in that mood and that's where it landed, then maybe think of some of those, quote unquote rules to think about to make it, even more appealing to, let's say if you do something and it's mid to up tempo and it's happy and there's all these different things that make it really syncable. And then the lyric is, talking just about a specific country or something, like everything else made it really syncable. And then that one thing just cut off like 80% of the opportunities, right? Because, when you're seeing something, they're going to cut to this, drone shot of London and now we're flying over and it's like this vibe. And then, but you're singing about, Belgium or something. And then, okay, well, that doesn't work because now we're cutting over London. And it's just in general, like they're in a park in Central Park and it's the same vibe. Everything else works about it, but now that doesn't. So I think that's the only reason to think about those kind of like, I use it as like a checklist at the end, after you've made the song. I think if you start in a place of, I hear this a lot on, I don't know if you ever listen to Ross Golan's podcast, and the writer is, but it's like a songwriting podcast, but it's with like pop guys and girls that he's worked with in the past. But the a lot of times he'll say like you don't go into a session saying, I'm gonna write a hit because like that's a hard, you know what I mean? Like you're putting this pressure instantly and you're probably gonna come out with, not the greatest song that you want, like it's not coming from the right place. So
Fact.
that was a very
Many
long-winded
people,
way to say yes.
many people try though. They try and write something. Let's write a viral pop song. Let's write a sync song. And I think you can emulate the success habits, but you'll never nail the emotion because you can have all the elements that would traditionally make that pop song, but the heart isn't there. And I think in this whole conversation, you've spent so much time talking about feeling and emotion and energy. And I can tell that's why you're damn good at your job, man, because you have a love of music, but you place it to make the emotion of the audience and the director make their vision come to life. That's the one thing I've heard consistently throughout this. So I hope all the musicians listen to this find value in understanding music supervision before understanding sync. I think this is so key and clutch to just understand this dynamic. So thank you hugely.
Yeah, of
Where
course.
can people connect with you? Where can they sign up for your newsletter? Where can they grab the course? Give yourself, please, the space you need to share the amazing work you do, please.
Yeah, I think I'm at Trigga Tovin, Trygge, since that's not an easy one to guess, but I'm sure it'll be on the podcast name. Trigga Tovin. I believe that's Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever, everywhere else. And then, I have a sync and creativity newsletter that's at let's see here, blog.vidsyn.com. So vidsyn.com. And then I have a course for like basically a lot of stuff we've been talking about of how to kind of, what basically getting a hold of supervisors, like how to do the right, all the stuff we talk about with sync agents and there's a whole section on music that's like what makes a song really syncable. So I went over all that stuff as well. And that's just a course.vidsyn.com. But
Dude,
I'm sure it's all linked in my socials. So yeah.
I'll pepper it down through the whole YouTube description. But no, thank you for your time, and I really, really appreciate this. This is inspiring me. I learned a tremendous amount just hearing it. Because again, I love these conversations where I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm coming from a genuine place of learning. That's to me what this is all about, you know. So thank you, bro.
Thank you. No, it's awesome. It was great to, yeah, great to chat.